Morning, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Swansea Local Pensions Board. I think the first item on the agenda is the apologies for absence. Jeremy, have you been notified of any?
I have actually. I had an apology from Councillor Mike Lewis, Chair of the Pension Board, Pension Committee.
Thank you. And does anybody else have any bringing on behalf of anybody else? I can't see any indications, but please do speak up, as I'm on a single screen here and I'm flipping between the agenda and the Teams screen. So next item on the agenda being disclosures of the minutes of the last meeting. Jeremy, I'm presuming for disclosures of interest you'll be sending the form around. Do you want us to formally go around now?
Yes, Chair. Yeah, I circulated it earlier, so if everybody can declare verbally, I may as well declare now I've got an interest as a member of the local pension board.
And I've got a personal interest on the agenda as a whole, as I'm also a member of the local pension board.
And I've also got an interest as a member of the pension.
Yep, I'm also a member of the pension scheme.
Jeff, I think you've got a hand up. Is that for declaration?
Correct, Chairman. Like to declare an interest in gender as a whole. I'm a member of the LGPS.
I also have an interest as a member of the LGPS.
I also have an interest as a member of the LGPS.
Is that everyone now, or have I missed someone out?
No, that's all of us.
Chair.
Fine, thanks. It is heartening that we're all that we all have an interest, and it's the same one that we are members of the scheme. Going back to the agenda, then we've got minutes of two meetings. One is the last substantive meeting, and that's at agenda item 3, meeting of the 5th of October. And if I go through it, if anybody wants to stop me for matters arising and for accuracy, on page 1, which is paragraphs 19 to 20, 21 to 24, and on the final page, paragraphs 25 to 27. Would somebody like to move those to the correct record? One of the members of the board. Thank you. Anybody got any issues with their accuracy? Against us abstaining? I'm seeing seeing or hearing no indications. And were there any matters arising as we went through them? I'm hearing nothing. So going on to the next minutes, which is the meeting which was in Quorit. There must have been some other attraction going on there at the time. Jeremy, how do you want us to deal with these minutes of the Quorit meeting?
It's just a matter of just approving them as well.
Yeah,
as the correct record. Obviously, there was no items that took place, so
no. But it's correct that it was in Quorit, so yes. I'd be happy to move that.
Okay.
Anybody abstaining or voting against? And I'm seeing nothing. Thanks, Jeremy.
Thank you, Chair.
So the first substantive item is the audit from the Wales Audit Office. And Jeff, I think you're going to deal with this item here.
Yes, Chairman, I am. Historically, I've always presented on behalf of Audit Wales. They are formally invited to the meeting, although they politely decline, and yeah, happy to do so on their behalf. Just before I kick into the main first substantive item, I didn't know whether to raise it at Matters Arising, Chair, but obviously I did send an email around to local pension board members as well as the pension fund committee about the good news that the fund was successful in winning the LAPF award for the best climate change strategy at the LAPF Awards in December 2022. As you know, Chairman, the fund was also shortlisted for Pension Fund of the Year and Investment Strategy of the Year. It was unsuccessful in those two categories, but was successful in, and to quote the Pension Fund Committee Chairman, the blue ribboned award in the environment that we're in. The best climate change strategy. So very pleasing, an endorsement over the work by the committee and supported by the local pension boards in their endeavours to achieve net zero in its investment portfolio.
Before you do move on to the report proper, then Jeff, I think that is excellent news, and perhaps the board ought to formally congratulate and have minuted its formal congratulations to the administering authority on winning that award. Do members agree? Ryland? Yeah, I'm seeing a thumbs up, David.
Yes, happy.
Yeah, so yes, congratulations, Jeff and Karen as the representatives here, and perhaps you take that back to your respective teams as well.
Thanks, Chairman. If you're happy, Chair, I'll move on to the first substantive item, the Audit of Accounts report by Audit Wales. You happy for me to move on, Chairman?
Yes, very much so.
Thank you. Again, like the Chairman says, I'm working on a single screen, so if there are any questions arising as I go through the report, please do shout out as I can't see any hands up, etc. You're used to seeing this report on an annual basis, as required by law. We're required to have our financial statements fully audited by our appointed external auditors, who are, in this instance, Audit Wales. They're used to working with us now. They're a number of years into their audit contract with the authority, so it is very much business as usual. However, there were a couple of personnel changes in respect of the personnel undertaking the audit. We have a new audit manager now, Gillian Gillette, and it's her first time auditing our pension fund accounts in that regard. So on page 9 of the report, they introduce their main findings and some of their key assumptions within the report and how they undertake their work. Key of which is their materiality level that they set, i.e., a level under which they consider I wouldn't say trivial, but they do not consider appropriate to draw to your attention, and that materiality level is £29.3 million this year for the audit, and that's just indicative of the sheer size of the pension fund at the moment. As you're aware, just shy of £3 billion. In respect of a materiality limit, in other matters, that's a general materiality limit for the whole audit. However, in some transactions, which obviously don't reach £29 million, they've considered materiality limits more akin to those transactions, and then In point 5 on page 8, they've identified them as £1,000 for key management personnel disclosures and £10,000 for related party disclosures. So again, using those limits, if any transactions which are above those limits, they feel that need to be brought to your attention, that they have done so. You'll see that this year's external audit report is probably one of the shortest that you'll recall receiving from Audit Wales, in that it's indicative of the timing of their work and the report produced, in that historically, because of the timelines required to produce the annual report, we've had to historically include estimated figures, and then when they come and audit, we have the real figures, the actual figures. There's always a discrepancy between estimated and actuals, and they bring those differences to your attention. However, because of the timing of the report this year, it was later, and the timing of their audit work was later. Those differences were able to be captured within the final report that was presented to external audit, and hence, the usual report findings that they would bring to your attention in respect of those differences are no longer there. Hence, the report is very much shorter than it usually is. But you can see some of their significant issues arising from their audit on page 10 of the report, and their recommendations in respect of internal audit reports, control assurance reports of our investment managers, and how we, as the admin authority and those charged with governance, review those internal audit reports produced by our investment managers. We've historically determined to review them and bring them to the attention of those charged with governance by exception. However, there is a recommendation there that the pension fund improves its assurance arrangements in that area. It's a good practice recommendation. It's not a significant item. However, it's something that has arisen during the course of their audit. And again, in Appendix 3, you can see again their summary of corrections made, and again you can see from that appendix in Exhibit 3 how minor and trivial they were. They were various minor presentational amendments, basically typographical errors, full stops, grammar, etc. Again, no overall impact on the net expenditure and net investment assets of the fund. And then you can see on page 14 of the report, the proposed audit report, and then the letter that they're proposing, and certificate of completion of audit that they're proposing on page 18 as well. So happy to take any further questions, Chair, that you may have on the audit report and audit findings. As I say, a very clean report. Cleanest, in my memory, and again, that's testament to the quality of the document that was produced by Karen and her team. And yeah, that thanks and recognition was recorded by the Pension Fund Committee when they received this report back in September.
Yeah, it is a very pleasing report. Members, any questions for Jeff on the audit report? I can't see any. Jeff, obviously time has moved on now. Can I ask, did committee approve the report so that it's now a final document? It's a finalized document.
It is.
I think there was a letter that they wanted from us as well to tie the ends and everything. So that's all finalized now.
Following the meeting in September, Karen had a physical copy of the letter which the chair signed, and subsequently the Director of Finance has signed and sent off back to Audit Wales. So we have published the final statement of accounts and the audit letter, and they're available for inspection and published as required by law before the 1st of December of 2022.
Excellent. And as I say, congratulations to all those involved in that. Jeff, I think previously you've mentioned the difficulty of valuing illiquid assets. Can you just explain a bit more about what control assurance reports are, please?
Control assurance report. Normally, in any large organisation, you know, there's an internal audit regime which tests the internal controls. It's mainly about financial systems and financial processes and authorizations, etc. Well, in large financial institutions, they also have those robust systems of control, and more importantly, there's a quite regulated framework in which they're required to report annually on the robustness of those internal controls. So that is the internal assurance framework that they operate under. And there's slightly different regimes for the different asset classes of investments. Listed equity investments were listed on the stock exchange, have a very strict, rigid set framework for internal controls, and they have to report against a certain checklist of items. Private markets, by their very nature and which, you know, determines their increased risk but then increased potential return as well. It's a slightly less regulated. They're not unregulated, but slightly less regulated regime. And they report on a slightly different internal controls framework, but they're still required to report on that internal controls framework. The difficulty we had with Audit Wales was them understanding the different regulatory regimes that they reported under, in that their expectation was that our private market managers would be held to the same reporting regime as our listed equity managers would be, and their expectations was the same, and they expected the same reports identifying the same risk controls and assurance. There was a lot of dialogue that Karen, myself, and the managers had to have to provide, in the absence of those reports, provide alternative assurances about the controls framework. Rest assured that there is a controls framework in place in these managers. However, it's not in the form expected by Audit Wales as they would have expected in listed market equities. So it's very much, you know, I suspect Audit Wales are learning as well in that regard. And when the information requested was supplied in an alternative way, i.e., you know, the internal reports that are reported internally to the board of these management companies, etc., they were assured that they are in place. As I say, we don't regularly bring these to the attention of the committee. If there's nothing to report, historically, we've brought them by exception. I think a number of years ago, we did bring one to committee about some concerns about some valuations, etc. A number of years ago, I think we'd have to dredge back to when we formally brought those reports. But we didn't want committee to be bogged down by you know, these copious internal assurance reports. So that was the issue referenced in that audit recommendation. But as we say, it was a good practice recommendation, you know, again, our proposal is to formalise our internal working arrangements. There is a by exception basis, and just to reiterate that to Audit Wales.
Okay, thank you for that very full explanation, Jeff. What is it then? the report that will go to committee, and presumably we'll see it as well in the usual fashion. What will that look like?
If there is anything to bring to their attention, it will be something like our breaches report.
Okay.
You know, an audit finding, a weakness in an internal control that has perhaps failed, and there's been an error payment or an error in valuation. What the management remedial action has been taken, etc. And are we satisfied with that action being taken, and whether, you know, we're satisfied that error or risk will not reoccur? You know, something along those lines. And again, it's on an exception basis and on a materiality basis. You know, it's not best use of committee's time to be going through, you know, the minutiae of the workings of an investment
No.
management firm. It's only if it's relevant to our investment or and presents, you know, pertinent risks to us as an investor.
Okay, thank you again for a very full answer. Unless anybody's been struck by any questions while Jeff's been talking before we move on from this item? No? Well, again, perhaps in similar vein, our thanks to all those involved in the audit work, Jeff.
Thank you, Chairman.
The next item, leading very nicely on, the triennial valuation. And Jeff, in the absence of Aon, are you going to deal with any questions we have and take us through it?
I will, Chairman, in the absence of Aon. As I say, they do send their apologies. They were teed up to present it in
fairness
person.
to them, they turned up.
Yeah.
They did turn up once, didn't they?
Yeah.
At the aborted meeting.
Obviously, Chairman, all members of the local pension board were invited to the employers' meeting back in November, whereby largely this presentation was made in its entirety. I think nothing is omitting from this presentation that wasn't presented at that meeting. So members of the board who were in attendance in November will be familiar with it, although not completely. Not expected to know it off by heart, and happy to go through it again on a light touch basis. But obviously, this is a piece of work, just to remind members of the board, that occurs every 3 years as required by law, that we're required to value the fund and its assets and liabilities to assure ourselves that you know, we have a funding strategy to meet those liabilities, and that we can set and maintain appropriate contribution levels expected of our employers going forward, and to ensure you know, a solvent fund going forward in the medium long term to meet those medium long term liabilities and pension promises that exist for all our employers. So on page 26, just very briefly explains what that valuation is, and what it is, and why we have to have it. On page 27, shows, you know, what the actual liabilities are, and what we mean by liabilities. So basically, everyone's membership of the LGPS is and the benefits that they can expect at retirement is determined on the salary that they earn and number of years service that they've delivered to their employer. And to a varying degree, depending on whether it's final salary element or career average element, will calculate their ultimate pension that they receive. So those are ultimately the liabilities, all those pension promises that we've made to our members, and we project those going forward and assume that they have long working lives and have long happy retirements, etc. We project all that forward, and that's what you've got there on page 27, and then you come up with a figure, and behind behind that figure are lots and lots and lots of assumptions, because obviously you're projecting all this very much into the future, because you know, our members are still working and accruing benefits as we speak. So on page 28, then we have some data and some metrics about how that data has progressed. Intra-valuation. So as I say, the valuation has to occur every 3 years. So you can see that data progressing from 2016, 2019, and the latest valuation 2022 there. And those are some of the metrics are actives. So that's people still working, still paying into their pensions. Deferred, people who have left active LGPS employment but have not yet triggered or reached their retirement age, so their benefits are sort of frozen within the fund as yet. And then pensioners, people who are actually retired and are drawing down their benefits. So you can see some metrics there about how those numbers have changed during the years there on page 28. And then on page 29 we have the elements of the funding strategy. Behind the ultimate trend evaluation is the administering authority's adopted funding strategy, and that determines and outlines how we propose to manage and achieve our objectives of achieving full funding in due course. And here are some elements of that funding strategy, and that funding strategy will come before committee for formal adoption again in March 2023, and again come before the local pension board for information. However, the amendments to that funding strategy are out for consultation as we speak amongst our employers now, and will be forwarded to members of the local pension board for consultation in due course before it goes to committee for approval in March. And here on page 29, you know, you see some elements of that funding strategy, i.e. prudence. You know, some of these, again, previously I mentioned the valuation is based on sensible and professional assumptions that the actuary adopts, because obviously we're talking about projecting these figures a long time into the future, so you have to make reasonable assumptions in there, but it's adopting prudence when you make some of these assumptions. Employer risk, taking into account of you know the sustainability and the covenants of some of our employers. Some of our employers, like ourselves and East Talbot, have tax raising powers. Our income streams are guaranteed by Welsh Government and Majesty's Government. We have tax raising powers, as I say. So those employers are quite strong in their covenant. However, you know, some of our other smaller employers who don't have those safeguards in place, so some of the assumptions have to reflect those additional risks, for example. And then deficit recovery periods, again, you know, noting our obligations about future generations, and not encumbering future generations with burdens from this generation, etc. You know, we have to adopt appropriate recovery deficit periods for the fund. Moving on to the next page, then again, it deals with assumptions, and again you can see some of the other key assumptions that we make in respect of the valuation. That's a discount rate, inflation rate, pay growth. Those are pretty important, and also a key assumption they make is mortality assumptions. And again, the trends in the two most recent valuations prior to 2022 were an improvement in mortality, i.e. people were living longer. However, that seems to have bottomed out at this valuation, and so there's a slight benefit to be had in the slight tapering off of those improvements in mortality assumptions in the fund. And again, there's some allowance that has been made on page 33 for the impact of COVID. Obviously, the long-term effects of that are still working their way through the populace, but the short-term impact of COVID has been factored in and included in the valuation for 2022. On page 35, again, it reflects that issue that I've mentioned about the strength of employer and how we can use and adopt different assumptions for how strong or weak, and that's the terminology used on page 35 that the actuary deems the employer and the strength of that covenant, and then again that affects the contribution rate payable. And one of the most important and one of the assumptions that most moves the dial in terms of ultimate contribution rate payable is the discount rate, and this is set out on page 36. And the discount rate is and you're probably asking, what is the discount rate? This is the notional rate at which we discount those future liabilities to present day value, to bring all those future pension promises into a monetary value today, that we can say, look, this is how much money we need today to meet all those future pension promises going forward. And that discount rate is largely a combination of the future expected return on investments, because we expect the cash that we've got today to grow over in time to meet those future liabilities and be able to meet those future pension payments. And that's a key assumption. And that assumption is outlined on page 36. And on page 37 then is a comparison really between those key assumptions in 2019 and 2022. And as you can see on the majority of those metrics, there's been an improvement in assumptions adopted for 2022. So what do I mean an improvement? I.e., we've decreased the level of risk within those assumptions. We've adopted more prudent levels of risk in those assumptions on all those metrics across there. And that would inform then some of these results that we can see on page 39 and 40. That's just revisiting the 2019 valuation, whereby the result gave us a 91.5% funding ratio, whereas the 2022 valuation, we, as we indicated in November, we're looking at 100% valuation. However, it's important to note that 100% is achieved using more prudent valuation assumptions than in 2019. I don't know if the actuary's included it here. No, he hasn't included it here. She hasn't included it here, sorry. In that, if it was undertaken on the 2019 valuation assumptions, we'd be looking at something in the region of 110% funding level. So you can see the effect of bringing in those key assumptions, to adopt more prudent assumptions. And you're thinking, well, why have you adopted more prudent assumptions? Well, obviously, the key one, the discount rate, the outlook for investment returns going forward is a lot more bleak than it was maybe 3 years ago, 6 years ago. Because obviously, as we'll allude to when we go in through the annual report, the investment returns during the last 3-6 years have been above average in the market, but for us as a fund, we've markedly outperformed the market, and the expectation that we can continually deliver those outsized returns is unrealistic, and hence it's appropriate that we bring in those assumptions about investment returns going forward. Also, you're used to hearing about inflation at the moment, how it's running away with us, and the actuary has recognised that and has adopted a short-term inflation premium to reflect that. And again, that wasn't included in the 2019 valuation. So as you can see on page 42 of the pack, you can see then what that means at a total fund level for employer contributions. So you can see, at this time when public sector budgets are being squeezed, you can see that this is a very welcome fillip for local government employers, in that the requirements that they're required to make into the pension fund in respect of the employees will reduce going forward from 2023 onwards as a result of the 2022 valuation. And then risks and uncertainties, and then you can see then on page 44 then what the impact of some of these assumptions and what a difference, as little as a 1% change in discount rate, or not achieving that 4.1% that we're assuming. And so if the discount rate falls by 1% per annum, we'll go from 100% funding down to 81% funding. That's just a 1% change in that discount rate. So you can see the sensitivity to the whole valuation process on these assumptions, and why it's important to get them right, but also why it's in our favour to be as prudent as possible to safeguard ourselves against some of these potential outcomes in adopting prudent assumptions in respect of these key considerations. And then the rest of the report, Chairman, goes into some more detail about scheme issues like McLeod, the cost cap, etc., and how they've incorporated those ongoing issues within their valuation. Suffice to say, they've included them. I won't go into the technical how they've technically included them in the valuation. However, there's a monetary inclusion within those calculations for those risks within the valuation outcome. And again, some other locally adopted assumptions about grouping smaller employers together, again to smooth the volatility of their contribution outcomes should they cease to be an employer, or they have a change in workforce, and then to manage that volatility for those small employers on a better basis. So that was a whistle stop tour, Chairman, and happy to take questions you may have on the valuation outcome.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm sure we're all very grateful for that whistle-stop tour, and once again, another pleasing document to be brought before the board today. Questions, please? Ryland, are you indicating, or was it no? Thanks. Yeah, so we'll be proficient in sign language by the end of this and these remote meetings. Jeff, I had one question relating to page 46 on the report. You touched upon the short-term inflation rate. Since the assumptions were made, how is that borne out in practice?
Inflation has slightly improved, Chairman, as you're aware. It peaked at about 11%, didn't it? Actually, at the time of the consultative meeting back in November, if I recall, and things have improved. Obviously, energy prices, petrol prices has come down slightly, and then they're the main drivers of that inflationary figure. But then other things such as food has continued to go in the wrong direction. So their short-term inflation premium that they've adopted would seem to be there or thereabouts at 10%. It's, some could argue it may be overly prudent, but it's there or thereabouts, I think, Chairman. Obviously, inflation is always retrospective, isn't it? After they've appraised that basket of goods, and you're always looking back, really. But there are projections going forward, and the assumption adopted by the actuary would seem prudent. I've heard nothing to say that they want to immediately revisit that, in terms of not assuming enough.
Thank you, Jeff. And I think I've seen somewhere there was an estimate of the knock-on effect of 1% changes, wasn't there? So they've done that. Just to clarify, Jeff, that also fits into the prudent ethos as a whole. Presumably, they were asked to be prudent, to make prudent assumptions by the administering authority
Correct.
in their valuation. Yeah,
it's very much they're the appointed actuaries. They have their professional body to answer to, and they would not sign off a valuation that they would not be comfortable signing off in a professional capacity. However, it's in their interest to work with the admin authority, and obviously recognizing, as I say, the affordability issue. If you completely had, you could. There are ranges of options, Chairman, and there's a balance to be struck between being overly prudent, which could potentially impact financially on employers in this difficult time, but also safeguarding the long-term interests of the fund, and not being overly generous, shall we say, in relaxing this. So I think we've achieved a happy middle ground in that we've been able to reduce employer contributions by material levels, whilst also increasing the prudence levels. So I think in actual terms that would be a free lunch almost, in that regard, in that we're increasing our prudence levels, however we're still releasing or reducing, reducing contributions expected of employers going forward. So and hopefully it's a win-win in that regard.
Yeah, and I think as a board we'd certainly endorse that a prudent approach, which seems to have resulted in a 100% funding level. Any other questions before we move on? I can't see any indications. So on to the annual report, which we've seen in draft, haven't we, Jeff?
Yes, Chairman. That's quite right.
I don't know if you want to take us through focusing on the changes, if there's been any changes, or just reminding us of the highlights. Thank
you, Chairman. Yes, that's what I was going to propose to do. Chairman, as you quite rightly say, you received this in draft version. However, post-audit amendments, we always bring the final version to committee for their citing post-audit, and likewise the local pension board. Again, want to place on record my thanks personally, and thanks to the committee, to Karen Cobb and her team for producing this annual report. I think it runs on to now on 300 odd pages, I think, and it's a very technical document. It takes a lot of compilation, and very grateful to her and her team for producing this report and the accompanying clean and pleasing audit report with it. As you quite rightly say, Chairman, you've received this previously, and I'll just bring your attention to some key highlights of the report on page 62 of the pack and page 3 of the report. Some key metrics there. You can see, you know, we're looking at key metrics of the fund, and you know, we're looking at just shy of 48,000 members now. You can see on page 62, with 21,000 contributors, 14,000 pensioners, and just over 12,000 deferreds. It's an open scheme, as I say. Still, you know, we've still got new members signing up, and it's still open to future accrual, as are all LGPS funds. And then if we move to page where I didn't make it, page 332 of the report, where we have the net asset statement, and again, just want to remind the board, and in the context of the valuation and to manage expectations going forward. Again, you can see on page 332 that the fund has returned, you know, another £300 million during the year. You know, has made an investment return of £300 million during the year.
Sorry, Jeff, that page.
Sorry, page 139. Sorry, 139.
Right. Okay.
Sorry, Chairman.
No, that explains my confusion.
On page 139, and then page 80 of the report. Sorry, Chairman. As you can see, that's where the main body of the account starts, the statement of accounts, and you can see that the increase in fund value there of just shy of £310 million, and that's on top of the £600 million that we made in increase in fund value prior year. So just shy of £1 billion in 2 years, which has largely contributed to that great valuation outcome that we just discussed in the previous report item, Chairman. So yeah, that incredible investment return cannot be projected over the next 3 years, and that has borne out, as we'll see later on in the agenda, as we see the investment report from April to December. Yeah, it has been quite volatile. It has been quite negative, and that prudence adopted in the valuation would be seen to be very well placed. As I say, Chairman, the board has received this report before, and as I say, very pleasingly, there were no material adjustments to be made, save for typographical or grammatical errors and amendments and presentational changes that have been made that Karen has subsequently made upon recommendation from Audit Wales. So nothing really change-wise to bring to your attention at this stage, Chairman. So happy to take any detailed questions that you may have on the document.
Yes, thank you, Jeff. David.
You mentioned about deferred members, and I'm getting more and more members wanting to withdraw from the pension for no deferred or go to the 50/50 scheme because of, you know, increasing costs, you know, with the financial cost moment outside, you know, with fuel and all that. So do you have any figures, like for the last 6 months or the last year, how many people have withdrawn or deferred, or because of the 50/50 scheme? Because I would always say, do what you can to keep your pension going. However, I do have empathy with what they're saying.
That is a concern, David, and yeah, I mean, all the interaction with members does reiterate that message that you've just conveyed about being in your long-term interest to maintain membership for a secure retirement. But you're quite right. Lots of people's considerations are the here and now, and they do make that choice. I can make inquiries about those metrics for you. And I'm happy to report back to local pension board if those can be extracted for the last 12 months.
And I know you have to excuse my ignorance now. That might be a dark question. Right? I know we contribute so much, and the work contributes so much, right?
Yep.
So if let's say, for instance, somebody was to withdraw their contribution, could the work still put in their contribution?
No. You as you say, David, you know, a wise thing would maybe to go 50-50 or an element of that. But if the member withdraws completely from the scheme, they can't just have the employer's contributions making up their element of membership. It's conditional on the employee making that contribution as well. The scheme isn't set up just to be a non-contributory scheme as far as the employee is concerned. It's contributory as far as the employee is concerned, and then the variable then is the employer's contribution, which varies intra valuation as per previous item.
I only know the 50-50 scheme. Could it be like a 25% scheme or a 25-25 scheme? Is anybody working around that at all? Anything, you know, these are the members that are asking these questions, you know.
We can, you know, our pension admin team with Claire and Emily do have roadshows on a regular basis, and members are invited to attend and ask, you know, whatever questions they may have, and the team will be able to answer them. But I'm going to have to get back to you on that, David, because nominally it is the 50-50, but in my mind, I do think it's a minimum and a maximum up to 50-50. So yeah, potentially it could go from, you know, 60-40, 70-30, etc., up to 50-50.
Okay, cheers, Jeffrey. Cheers, thank you.
Okay, and David, do you have any more questions?
Sorry, no, I don't.
No, okay. Unless there's any questions from you, Rylan? No, I see a shake of the head. Jeff, I wanted to ask a question, which is page 74 of 389 under my numbering. It's about the complaints. And firstly, I think there's two from the 22 period, which were ongoing at the time the report was written. Is that still the case? Are they still ongoing?
Yes.
Okay.
They're with the Ombudsman, and Carolyn's on the line here. She'll attest to this. We've had many a Dear John email from the Ombudsman apologising for the delay. Please bear with. I mean, in one of the cases, I think we've had 3 successive emails saying, "Oh, please bear with." They're dealing with it. So, yeah, they still are outstanding, Chairman, and
okay.
we've responded robustly. You know, in both cases, commissioned Queen's Counsel to endorse the emphatic admin authority position and decision taken. So we're comfortable with both the original decision and the appeals process within. The way it's left standing, and obviously this is no help to the member raising the complaint in the first instance, is that we're still on waiting final pensions ombudsman for their adjudication, and that's no fault of our own, I'm afraid.
Yeah, no, and as you say, it affects the employee as well. On that theme, then I see in the next paragraph that there's one complaint still outstanding from 1920, the 2019-2020. Is that one still outstanding as well?
I think that's the one I refer to in respect of the ongoing issues. So I'm going to have to get back to you, Chairman, hand on heart.
Well,
I don't know in which year they relate to.
okay, well, no need to prioritize that by any means, Jeff. It was just a thought, because obviously elsewhere in the press that there are complaints about the tardiness of the ombudsman, aren't there?
Yeah. Suffice to say, Chairman, in all those cases, we've addressed them, responded to pension ombudsman query. It's up to the pension ombudsman to make their adjudication. I can say hand on heart in this instance, it's not with us at the moment.
It's ironic, isn't it? Because the ombudsman was supposed to be a quick and cheap means of resolution. Okay, thanks for that, Jeff. Before we move on, does anybody struck by any last minute questions they want to ask? And I can't see any.
Just pertinent to that, Chairman. I mean, you've raised that whole process, the IDPRP process, in total, and obviously Carolyn attends local pension board and committee. I mean, I just want to personally thank Carolyn. She's instrumental in that whole process, in guiding us through the legal process and formulating our response. So it's quite timely that you raised that, and she's on the call, because all those cases that you refer to have Carolyn's fingerprints all over them, and in a good way.
Okay, well, there you go, Caroline. You've heard that tribute.
Very kind of you, Jeff. Thank you.
Perhaps you'd better get it minuted as well. Thanks. And yes, while we're in the grateful mood, perhaps Karen, you could pass on the board's thanks to yourself and to your team in getting that document finalised.
Thank you,
Ian. Just before we do move on, Jeff, I've realised I had something I was going to ask regarding the award, which was, did Swansea ever put out a press release trumpeting the success in the awards?
I've left it with our corporate marketing department. It went up the line. It was in the chief exec's blog last week. So I don't know. The chairman of the committee, Councillor Mike Lewis, I think he's out of the country at the moment. He was quite keen. I know we have politicians around, but as is their want, he was quite keen to make the most of it. And so I've left it with him, I'm afraid. Ian. So watch this space, I think.
Yeah, well, I think we'd endorse Councillor Lewis's keenness, because as you'll be aware, it is something our members do. One of the few issues our members do regularly question us about is our what I was going to say responsible investing. It's pretty much the environmental side of things attracts the most interest. Thanks, Jeff. So going back to the agenda, a usual item for us, the breaches report, Jeff.
Thank you, Chairman. And this is page 332. Apologies, Chairman. I mean, in my annotation I've got down here in my notebook, I mixed them up. I'm sorry.
No problem.
On page 332 is it's where the most recent breaches are. Again, as Chairman says, you're used to receiving this report. These are the latest breaches. Nothing to see here in regard to, the same time worn breaches, but we're required to report them to you. They're trivial in nature, trivial in amount. Remedial action has been taken insofar as it's been taken, but how effective it is largely determined by the individuals pertaining to, as you're aware. We have the usual offenders in that regard. So but we're monitoring it, obviously, because historically we've been quite relaxed about it. because of the low interest rate environment. However, now with increasing interest rates, you know, any timeliness or lateness in receipt of contributions now could have a more material impact on the fund. So we're monitoring it with a view to escalating that action going forward. But you know, in years gone by that we've been reporting to board, it's been of such a trivial amount in nature, and we do eventually get the sums due in due course, so that they just happen to be late and outside the window required by regulation.
Any questions on this item? No. Jeff, just one point. I do like the more detail in that little chart at the end
Yeah.
of the number of contributors, the dates, etc.
Yeah.
So congratulations on that. That does make it a lot more readable. I'm assuming the abbreviation NYP there is not yet paid.
Yeah, that was at time of reporting.
Yes.
At committee. So suffice to say, they have paid now.
Fine. You anticipated my question. Thank you.
Yeah. That is the repeat offender, and as I say, you know, he's a one-man band. You know, we fined him previously, as you're aware, to no avail, and you know, it's just one of those things that we sort of accept. He's always going to be late, you know, to varying degrees.
Yeah. Okay. So flipping screens here. The WPP update, Jeff.
Thanks, Chairman. Obviously, a lot's happened during the quarter since the local pension board has met, and you know, you yourself personally and other members of the local pension board have participated in lots of activity in respect of WPP, i.e. attending the training that they've put on during the interim. So you know, through that mechanism, you know, you'll be aware that it's been a busy period, and then you can see then within that report some of the actions that would be of interest to local pension board, and that is obviously a key element of our responsibility as stewards of assets is the engagement piece, and largely a lot of the training is around that engagement piece, and you can see some of the metrics there whereby our engagement partner Rubico is engaged on our behalf with investee companies, a number of meetings they've undertaken, etc., etc. This report is quite generic in that it's gone to all constituent authority funds to report on, and yeah, happy to take any questions in respect of this report. And just as for info, I think we're reviewing the WPP reporting and updates that we're going to get. In that, largely, historically, I've just reported what I think is pertinent to committee and local pension board. There's going to be a more generic, from the horse's mouth, WPP update, which is going to be produced by the host authority, which is Carmarthenshire, which every single constituent authority will receive and report to its members going forward. So I think that it'll be a development of this report that you see in front of you.
Okay, and how often is it anticipated that's going to be produced, Jeff?
Quarterly, Chairman. In the way that later on in the agenda, yeah, I've got a WPP update, which Karen and I collate on an individual basis, and this is replicated elsewhere. There's going to be a generic WPP update from the horse's mouth on a quarterly basis.
Okay, thank you. I think that's welcome. Not least, I think it'll reduce workload, won't it?
No, most definitely, Chairman.
But could I also ask? You're obviously on a number of you're in the officer working group, aren't you? That you also exercise your independent judgment to bring anything to us that you think we ought to be made aware of.
We will certainly do so, Sharon.
I'm sure you would have done anyway. Okay. Any questions on the update or what Jeff's just told us? I see no indications. So moving on, these are all information items for us. Moving on to agenda item 16, the pension admin resources.
Thank you, Chairman. As you recall, we had some good feedback about the training that we put on last year when Aon came down to do some training, and a lot of the feedback and a lot of the engagement that members of the board and committee had, and well, perhaps found the most enjoyable really was talking about the admin side of the business, i.e. dealing with members, calculating members' benefits, how those members' benefits are accrued, how how you can gain membership, etc., etc. And basically that's the core of the business really, is paying members' benefits and making sure those members' benefits are right, in accordance with a number of years service and salary, etc. And that's a key function. And you met a number of the senior members of that team, namely Claire and Nick and Emily, I think, at that training, and some other senior members. And as this report points out, and as you may have seen for yourself, it's an incredibly complex scheme in that it's not a single scheme anymore. It's ostensibly 3 separate schemes which have amalgamated, and the calculations and regulations pertaining to those 3 schemes are huge, and the admin of those member benefits is becoming more and more burdensome and more resource intensive. Obviously, we leverage technology as much as we can. We use, the market leader in Haywoods in managing those member records, and we work in partnership with Haywoods in updating that system and getting it to work more efficiently. And example, recent improvements have been iConnect, the electronic interface that we have with employers, iReporting, etc. And we are trying to leverage technology where we can. However, because of the complexities of the scheme, and because we're dealing with people and people's individual circumstances are so individual, it does require a lot of manual intervention and manual consideration of source documentation, source data, etc., to get these member records right. Cut a long story short, Chairman, this report is looking to augment the pensions admin resource appropriately, and it just gives some metrics comparing our resourcing to our peers in WPP, and just bringing us up to those levels that our peers are operating under, in terms of cost per member, in terms of officers per member, ensuring that we've got an adequate resource to deal with it, and then highlighting how we're going to use that resource going forward, in relation to a number of things on the horizon in respect of the McLeod remedy, which again will require manual intervention to amend individuals' records appropriately. This report was approved unanimously by committee in asking for that additional funding to pay for those additional staff, i.e. making the 4 temporary staff permanent, and then also the 4 additional members of the admin team, which has been put on hold at the moment, noting it was noted that the local government settlement might be more challenging than it was, resulting in perhaps some redundancies, and we paused the recruitment process as a result of this report to perhaps accommodate people displaced from that. However, both Neath Patalva and Swansea have received a better than expected local government settlement. So perhaps the outcome of that may not have been so material. So I think we're going to proceed to recruit for those 4 vacancies as well. And also then the eagle-eyed amongst you there will also have seen the recommendation for an additional accountancy resource to support Karen going forward as well. Again, there was a hiatus on the actual recruitment of that pending local government settlement, but again, I think we're safe to proceed on recruiting for that going forward now as well, Chairman. So happy to take any questions that you may have.
Board, any questions? No. Just from my perspective, Jeff, very pleasing that committee approved that, and pleasing to hear that recruitment is about to start or soon. Is that a fair summary of what you said?
We're going to wait to finally see the outcome of budget proposals and the budgets for both Nipa Talbot and Swansea to be finalised to ensure that there are no material displacements resulting from those budget considerations, and then we can proceed to recruit.
Okay, and just to endorse what you said, a side effect of our training is getting to be speaking to staff members, and that's often as useful as the formal training. I did speak to some members of the admin team there and extended an invite to them if they wanted to present anything to board, and you know, with the understanding that they are overworked, that's not by any means a request to them, but an offer. So I don't know if you want to reiterate that to them. If there's anything they want to come and say to board, they'd be very welcome.
I'll reiterate that invitation to them, Chairman.
Yeah, if you can make it clear, it is a true invitation, and not an invitation that that they ought to feel obligated to accept. But yeah, thank you. And the next item is agenda item 7, which is to consider the going into private session, and you can see the reasons outlined in the report. Could I have a proposal, please, for us to go into private, unless there's any questions on the reasons? And I can't see any. Could I have a proposal then?
I'm happy to propose.
Thank you. And Ryland, I saw your hand go up, and I'm also in favour. So we'll go into private session. Jeremy, are you able to do the necessary?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll stop the recording now.